because I want to talk to you also about the story about Amazon that you've got running in the Prospect. What? Tell us about that.
Sure. So I wrote a story yesterday at the Prospect about Amazon and specifically about this issue of forced arbitration, which I'm sure you've talked about on the show. These are the clauses in consumer or employment contracts that essentially block the courthouse door. They force people who have disputes into a private, secret arbitration process where the company who uses this process all the time and might have the same arbiters
it has the same conflict that they did with the rating agencies with
the issuer
with
pays model.
They work more for the companies than they work for you as an individual.
And also you as an individual, if you have a dispute as a customer, for $50 over getting ripped off on something, are you going to pay a lawyer to go to this private process? You can't do class actions. And so I talked about it in the context of something that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is Amazon's marketplace. This is the third-party sellers that are on Amazon. There are over 2.5 million people on Amazon selling their goods, and sometimes it's their own brands that they've come up with. Sometimes they buy a bunch of stuff at a discount store and then resell it on Amazon, and all of them must sign this arbitration clause as part of their agreement of selling on Amazon. And in an employment context, this is the largest class, the largest entity of people who have signed an arbitration agreement, signed away their right to sue Amazon for over any dispute. And this creates this weird Byzantine private government, basically, that Amazon uses to govern its marketplace. And I talk about this in detail in the piece, but just as a short version, basically, Amazon has terms and conditions that change all the time. You have to abide by them. They can suspend you at any time for any reason. You get an email in the middle of the night and you say your account's suspended. It could be as much as one bad review that you get from a customer. It's a very customer is always right kind of place. Right. And if you are suspended, you obviously can't sue. You can go to arbitration, but that's a long shot. There's this weird appeals process that Amazon has outsourced all the appeals deciders to low-wage countries like India or Costa Rica or wherever. And the people who read these appeals have to read 17 of them an hour. So they're basically spending 3 minutes on your appeal, which is your livelihood. Because when you're suspended, you can't sell anything.
Right.
Any money that hasn't been remitted to you from prior sales, Amazon keeps. Amazon keeps your inventory. Amazon can sell your inventory if it's commingled with other inventory. If it's like a widget that's the same as other people's widget, they can just sell your stuff. You have to pay to get your inventory back. No, it's crazy.
Wow.
It's absolutely crazy. And the Amazon marketplace is a complete Wild West where people write fake reviews. They have counterfeits all over the place. There are all these ways that rivals try to scheme, do dirty tricks to get you off of the marketplace. And Amazon is in charge of all of that. And you can't, the arbitration clause prevents you from seeking Article I courts to resolve any of these disputes.
Years ago, we had an Amazon link. At one point, they were starting to shut down links like ours, the way that we were using it, apparently.
Okay.
We got ours shut down. I had a check from them for, I don't know what it was, $1,500.
Right.
And went to cash it. Bounced.
Wow.
They had shut it down, they'd issued the check. This is indicative, it seems to me, of all of these major tech companies where they don't want to have to hire human beings.
Right.
So they're going to do it as much as they can with algorithms.
They also don't want liability. So, they don't want to proactively do anything. If you give a complaint to them, they'll clean it up. But they don't want to have to say, well, we intervened here. Why didn't you intervene here?
Right.
And then your liability is increased. And of course, the arbitration clause just amps that up another level, because then they're insulated from any kind of court lawsuits, and they go through this private secret process where the law isn't really applied uniformly. It's a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And I got to go in a couple minutes, but just to put a point on this, like we talk about this arbitration thing, and there's some working through companies like Google just ended its arbitration clause for sexual harassment cases. Other workers are organizing around these arbitration clauses, but this is a different animal. These are 2.5 million people who are essentially in competition with one another, selling on Amazon's marketplace, and their rights are being completely stripped by this arbitration clause, and they live in fear, essentially, that Amazon's, by any whim, can shut them down with no recourse. And so this, I think, is a good way to talk about arbitration and what it can really do to people.
I will bring that up when we get to Vegas, when we talk to some of these tort lawyers, because they have a real problem with this type of provision. All right, I know you only got 2 minutes left.
Yes.
Netroots Nation, give me your 2 minutes summary of how it's evolved.
Well, it's early on. It's early going here, but what I've been told is that this is the largest Netroots Nation ever.
Oh.
3,500 people will be at this weekend's event. It's brought some of us who've been here a while and then sort of drifted away. And this is my first year back after 2 years away.
I feel like I've had that conversation with a dozen people. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's an election year, and I think having the presidentials, although there are only going to be 4 candidates here, from my understanding. So having them here, I think, is part of it, and part of it is that. It's easier to get here on the Acela,
right?
Is part of it, but I don't know. For me, this is my hometown. I wanted to come back for that reason, partially, but also reconnecting with this community, which is bigger. It's more diverse. It's got a bigger issue sort of space,
right?
And I think it does remain.
Let me bounce this
it holds
theory
its
off
credibility as an important conference.
Even though there are sort of, I think, more distinct flavors of the left, the roots of this was built in opposition to George Bush.
Yes.
And I think after a year or two now, because I felt like this was happening last year, was the first time I was back in 5 or 6 years, that the being in the opposition party, being on the out, there's something that happens, and things. There's a thrust that everybody can sign on to, even if you have disparate agendas within that.
And it's true that people talk about, like, the one good thing about Trump is he's activated this, people on the left, people just on the broad left, left of center, to, think about themselves as activists and engage in these issues in a broader way. And, Netroots is certainly a part of that, always has been a part of that. And now you're seeing, people from the center, people from, the institutional machinery get really, militant about these issues. And so I think Trump has brought that to the fore. He did it in 2018. We'll see what happens in 2020. I think a lot of that is being defined right now by what is happening in Congress, and maybe we can talk about that another time.
Definitely.
And sort of demobilizing the left in some ways. But, it's still strong, at least in a residual way right here, and we'll see how that goes.
David Dayen, prospect.org. Folks, go and get a subscription now.
Please do. Thank you.
All right, thanks, David.
All right, take care.